Gonna need everyone to sit down. Go to your seats and sit down.
More aggressive.
If you're not at your seat, look at someone who is and do what they're doing. You're welcome to sit down. I just want to introduce our moderator. Lara Merling is a graduate of the Levy Institute's master's program. She's currently an economic research officer at the International Trade Union Federation and a senior research fellow at CEPR.
Thank you for being here and still awake for our last panel of the day, which is on digital currency in the future. And a lot of the hype, I guess, around digital currency has been mostly on Bitcoin and things like that, but there's so much more to the topic than just that. So luckily we have a great panel from a variety of backgrounds to tell us more about what digital currency means and what its implications are. And our first speaker is going to be Professor Tamara Nopper. She is a sociology professor at Rhode Island College, where her research focuses on the racial wealth gap and money, surveillance, and punishment. She is particularly interested in the intersection of fiscal policy and racial justice.
While Rohan is kind of setting that up, I just want to first of all thank Raul and Rohan and Nathan and all the other organizers for inviting me, and also for all the logistics and planning. It's a lot of work. I'm really grateful to be here, so thank you. So how's everybody doing?
Awesome, right?
That's great. This is my first time in Long Island, so have other people been to Long Island before, other than if you're here at Stony Brook? So.
I've seen it on the map.
You seen it on what?
I've seen it on the map.
On the map? Okay. You know, I got up at the airport and I was like asking them, where does the Lyft, Uber, like backup place? And they said, just walk outside. I was like, okay, sure. So, okay, thank you very much. Maybe it'd be better for Fran to go since she's right there. Okay. Poor Fran.
Thanks, sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. So, I'm talking about the issue of alternative data. And alternative data is something that has gotten a lot of attention in relationship to different policy initiatives. Some of the presidential candidates have talked about this. And this is something that's also been a bigger conversation about consumer protections and the issue of credit scoring. And I'm interested in how it's getting posed as being able to resolve some of the issues regarding the racial wealth gap and trying to curb some of the predatory ways that banks have dealt with minority communities. And so in the process, I'm also going to be talking about fintech and kind of the questions about regulating fintech and some of their use of alternative data. Okay, so one of the things is the whole issue of kind of credit invisible and credit unscorables. So the issue of credit scores. Credit scores, as we know, are major tools in kind of shaping opportunity chances things like being able to get a loan, but also things such as being able to rent, all these different kind of socioeconomic activities, some of them that are seen as pretty vital, some of them that are seen as opportunity building, rely a lot of times on a credit score. And so the issue of kind of who has a credit score, and so who even has kind of the data that can be put into a credit score. And this is something that has gotten a lot of attention. So there's about 44 million people that are vulnerable to having either a low or no credit score. Many of these people are women of any race, a lot of times they're people of color, and working class and poor people. So one thing that's happening is there's an increasing interest in alternative data. And alternative data is stuff that goes beyond kind of the traditional measurements of credit scoring. And this is, something that's getting attention by, as I said, policymakers, but also it's capturing kind of the attention of financial institutions and the credit scoring industry itself. So this is Representative Tim Scott, for example, and he is a senator in South Carolina. He is a Republican. He co-sponsored a bill with Democrat Mark Warner, and this was in 2017. But they were trying to take on FICO, right, the Fair Isaac Corporation score, which is kind of seen as the dominant score in the marketplace. And they were really trying to push for other scores. So this was also part of this conversation about breaking up kind of monopoly. They were pushing actually for the Vantage score. And not surprisingly, Vantage Corporation liked that very much, right? So now, we know that Kamala Harris is running for president as a Democrat. This is something that she announced. And what's noticeable, she announced it at the Essence Festival, that she wanted to try to have alternative data. And alternative data that, for example, instead of a mortgage payment, people are saying, well, some people don't own homes, but they might be able to show kind of character through their rental payments, right? And the reason I brought up that she announced this at the Essence Festival was because, for those who don't know, the Essence Festival is a major festival of a lot of times Black musicians and artists. It tends to get a lot of Black people who attend it. And so there's something where a lot of people are also talking about alternative data as particularly a way to try to address the racial wealth gap. And in her case, she was talking about it as a way to address the Black homeownership gap, right? In terms of, could alternative data be something that more credit score companies could take into consideration with banks? Now, one thing that's happening is, groups like TransUnion or Experian or Equifax, they also are interested in alternative data. They're kind of like, okay, and they're creating new kind of scoring models that are taking this into account. And so one of the things, of course, that we know is that credit scoring is big business. And it's a whole entire industry, and a lot of people, particularly, how do you pronounce your friend's name? Donna, your friend who writes a lot about credit scoring, Donna,
Sorry, what is she work?
No, I'm trying to remember his citation. Anyway, but there's a lot of people who've written a lot of really important histories and cultural histories about credit scoring and about its kind of recent emergence. And so you have TransUnion, right? Here is FICO, right? FICO, who has been both kind of very critical of alternative data, but is also talking about different kind of alternative data models that they can offer. So some of this alternative data is stuff like transaction data, telecom or utility data. And what I've been interested in is the social profile data and social network data, right? And so increasingly, the interest in kind of your online activity and your digital profile and using kind of your digital profile to assess ideas of character is something that's increasingly getting a lot of attention as alternative data. So this is also connected to the rise of fintech or financial technology and marketplace lenders and people who do most of their lending totally online. And the way that they're also trying to compete in the credit scoring industry against the kind of traditional credit scores like FICO. And they're saying, well, we have these innovative techniques, we have these scientific models that can use kind of alternative data like social media. We can get a better sense of kind of your character in ways by looking at things that other people might not look at. And so they're relying a lot on what is known as soft information, right? Hard to quantify, verify, and communicate through the normal transition channels of a banking organization. Now, one thing is soft information isn't a totally new thing, and that's what I'm kind of curious about is it's gotten posed as something kind of newer with the rise of fintech and with the rise of kind of social media data. But soft information has been part of kind of relationship lending for a long time, and part of the way that I came to doing research on some of this stuff was originally I was looking at immigrant entrepreneurship in Korean communities. And I actually started by looking at Black-Korean conflict. I was interested in the conflict between African American customers and Korean immigrants who set up shops in predominantly Black neighborhoods. And I had always been doing kind of ethnographies of their racial interaction, and I decided I wanted to look more at the financial landscape. So I did a whole, like 80-some interviews with Korean bankers and 7 federal government agencies to find out about how they lent and created programs designed to kind of target the immigrant markets. And in that process, all these kind of ethnic bankers were talking about relationship lending and aspects of what we call soft information. So there's kind of some precedence in, the way that soft information has been valued, but now we're seeing it kind of become part of certain kind of marketplace lending techniques, and it's being connected to this kind of social media scavenging, right? So, social media and soft information. So these are different social media, marketplace lenders who use kind of social media data to basically try to assess character. And so here's some of the things they say. This is from the chief executive of LendUpright. It's the tools we use to do underwriting. Do you have 4,000 friends but never that close? Or do you have 30 people but they're very close? I mean, how many of us actually have 30 people that were very close? I mean, that's a lot, right? Okay? Now I'm telling myself. But anyway, these are the ways to measure how engaged and how strong your community ties are, right? Chief Marketing Officer of Cabbage. Look at whether you get a lot of likes. Are you responding to customers, right? And so we know that we hear about kind of, when there's digital outrage and people kind of go on Yelp or Amazon and they do different things with reviews, right? A spokesman for Credit Tech. Is someone using an expensive mobile phone like an iPhone or logging in from a web cafe? Is their network on Facebook just drinking buddies from a bar, right? And then Alex Stein from Moment. The data we have on customers via social networks says more about them than their FICO. You can make credit decisions based not on a faceless score, but on who you know, right? And so these are just a sampling of companies that are looking at kind of your online kind of activity. And so when we're thinking about digital currency, of course we want to think about currency in terms of what people see as kind of digital money. But we're also thinking about kind of aspects of what I call digital character, right? So digital character is a concept I developed, and it appears in this chapter called Digital Character in the Sport Society, FICO, social networks, and competing measurements of creditworthiness. And this is published in a book edited by Princeton University professor Rohan Benjamin. And the book is called Captivating Technology, Race, Personal Technoscience, and Liberation of Imagination in Everyday Life, right? So the term digital character that I developed is a digital profile assessed to make inferences regarding character in terms of credibility, reliability, industriousness, responsibility, morality, and relationship choices, right? And so at the heart of risk assessment is this assessment of what we think your character is. Right? And so how are people kind of mining your digital profiles as part of your data to develop this sense of your character? So one of the things that's happened is FICO has pushed back, and kind of traditional credit scores have pushed back and said, well, digital profiles and digital kind of currency like that open themselves up to forms of discrimination. Right? If you're looking at people's photos or profiles and so forth. And some of the online lenders have said some, if you read their posts, they say things like, well, we don't look at the pictures. Right? I don't know how that works, right? But they'll say like, well, we don't look at the picture, we don't take that into consideration, right? And so one of the things that's happening is all these different companies that are competing with each other are talking about discrimination. And they're trying to pose themselves as more engines of anti-discrimination than each other, right? So FICO's response has been to say that we are ultra-scientific, right? and that we have a more scientific, non-biased measurement. And they literally say things on their website like, we've taken the bias out of, right, these processes. And then what a lot of the marketplace lenders do is they say things like, well, we are opening up opportunities to people who've been traditionally discriminated against, right? And that we might be more willing to lend to these underserved communities or the credit scorables or business, right? So one thing is, though, marketplace lending has not been well regulated. And this has gotten the attention of several different Congress people, so Merling, Brown, and Shaheen. We know Merling has been very involved in the Green New Deal, right? So this was in 2016, and they asked the Government Accountability Office to kind of do in-depth reporting about regulations, federal regulations, and kind of different concerns around regulating the online marketplace, right? And this is something I just want to kind of point out is that I welcome a lot of this regulation stuff because when we think about the regulatory state really declined in power when you started having more people of color and women of any race really trying to make inroads to getting access to credit, right? It coincided at the same time. And so right when more of these people start to get access to credit or making that more of kind of a political demand, that's when the regulatory state kind of backed down a little bit and you started to see more predatory lending. I mean, predatory lending is not entirely new towards communities of color, but you saw more of it happening, right? So Senator Warren, right, this was in the summer, and as you know, she's running for president, right? And she asked regulators about discrimination in terms of automated lending decisions. So this is something that automated lending decisions we know can be, definitely part of the marketplace lending, but it's also something that when we're thinking about how increasingly a lot of different institutions, whether it's courts or kind of, different companies, are using kind of automated, predictive data or algorithms, right? And so the questions about, is there what ProPublica call machine bias, right? Bias in the machine, right? So one of the things that was interesting is in the letter that she wrote, and this was in June, and I just want to read this. It says, researchers examined whether there were differences between human and algorithmic decision-making in determining whether to issue a loan and what terms. They expected to find some discrimination in decisions made by humans, but no difference on acceptance rates or terms based on an applicant's race in decisions made by algorithms. They found out that algorithmic lending, by increasing competition, quote unquote, in the lending market and making it easier to apply for mortgages, appeared to reduce the likelihood that the loan application of borrowers of color are rejected, thus reducing discrimination in lenders accept reject decision-making process. Other results, however, were less encouraging. Researchers found that face-to-face and fintech lenders charge Latinx African-American borrowers 6 to 9 basis points higher interest rates than comparable white or Asian ethnicity borrowers, which is almost identical to the interest rate premium that minority borrowers face with traditional underwriting. So one of the things that you're having is, algorithmic lending, stuff like, using alternative data. This is getting posed as possibly being able to challenge, right, the racial wealth gap by getting access to communities that have historically been locked out. Or it's seen as, how do we address the predatory lending? But, these people are getting access, but it's happening at what Louis Seamster and Ralph Chenier called predatory inclusion, right? So more people are getting access, but under what terms, right? And so this is part of a concern regarding federal regulation. So the GAO responded to that 2016 request by Merling, Brown, and Shaheen in 2018. And so this is the report they wrote where they interviewed a lot of people from the federal agencies regarding clarification on lenders' use of alternative data. And one of the things they're pointing out is that even as we have a lot of things regarding discrimination in credit, the use of alternative data, it hasn't been totally clarified how that will be regulated. And the same thing with algorithms and so forth. So what does big data kind of do in this case? This was a follow-up to that was published in 2019 regarding the use of fintech here, right? So then, Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, as we know, is also running for president, he put out a thing recently, a proposal to eliminate medical debt. Right? And at the end of the proposal, he called for creating a public credit registry. And so there are several things here that are important to that, is that he talked about the way that people of color and minorities tend to get the most kind of hampered by debt. He also talked about the role of credit reporting agencies being for-profit, right? The lack of transparency regarding what data. And he also called, and this is what I thought was interesting, was he called for the end of the use of credit checks for rental housing, employment, and other non-lending practices. So in a lot of ways, he's trying to both curb, according to this, curb kind of what credit, kind of background checks are involved in, right? So if there's certain kind of non-lending kind of economic transactions that don't require it. So he's saying what actually requires a credit score. But also, this is what I found most interesting. This registry will use a public, transparent algorithm to determine creditworthiness that eliminates racial biases in credit scores. Right? And so again, regardless of what kind of side of the political fence you're on, or if you're working for kind of, if you are part of the for-profit credit industry, or if you are, an advocate, a lot of people are talking about racial bias in kind of credit scoring and the use of credit, right? So these are some questions I have about some of this stuff, right? So on one hand, the problems are that we're told, the problems are credit reporting for profit, right? So creating a public registry, and this is something that not only he, Sanders, but also Demos are calling for, right? So the idea is kind of, not having credit reporting connected to a for-profit interest. The lack of transparency, the fact that a lot of this data is collected and that we don't always know what data goes into this stuff. FICO is a copyrighted, trademark kind of entity. A lot of these financial tech companies, or financial lenders, online lenders, they're trying to compete with FICO. They're creating their own measurements, and they're actually selling some of those algorithms and measurements to banks as well, right? And none of them are being transparent about kind of what the data is exactly, right, and how they measure it. So clearly that affects consumers, right? There's also been the concern about monopoly, and that's where I said Tim Scott and Mark Warner, when they said we shouldn't have so much as a FICO score, but we should have a Vantage score, right? And companies saying we like the thought of like one company not being able to dominate. And the bigger issue is like the types of data. What data becomes kind of part of the algorithm, right? And so when Bernie Sanders says we're going to use certain data that will take out racial bias, FICO claims that's what it's doing as well. The way FICO kind of challenges the marketplace lenders is saying your data is more open to bias. The marketplace lenders say, no, we don't look at the photos, right? So this whole question about what data itself, right, will be the best for kind of being non-discriminatory is also at the heart of this, right? So proposed solutions, transparency and accuracy, alternative data, credit reporting being public versus for-profit, and algorithms being transparent and non-racist, right? All of this sounds great, and I think these proposed solutions are a step in the right direction. And I will say Bernie Sanders is, out of all the people who kind of talked about the problems with alternative data and needing to regulate it, he's been kind of the most forthright about also saying what credit scoring should not be associated with, right, or credit reporting. Now, these are some questions I have, right? One thing I've been concerned about, and as Laura mentioned, my research is interested in kind of the relationship between money and surveillance. And so I have taught a class on money, crime, and punishment. I think a lot about kind of the ways people are punished regarding money and the ways money is used in a punitive way. And so one of the things I'm interested in is as we broaden the scope of socioeconomic or social activity that we consider alternative data, right? And part of broadening the scope is saying, how can we know more about you and your character based upon broadening our lens of kind of your socioeconomic activity? What I get concerned about is, how does that mean that for a lot of marginalized people, more and more of their life is under surveillance, and more of their life has the potential of maybe helping out them economically with their credit score, but also has more of a potential of causing problems for them.
And so if you're late on a payment, right, that actually always has economic repercussions and goes on your record in some way. But what does that mean when that starts to kind of be officially counted towards credit scores? I mean, in some of these scoring techniques it already is, right? But what happens when you have legislators calling for that to be counted, right? Will it always help you, or does it broaden the scope of kind of surveillance of your life and socioeconomic activities in a negative way? The question then about transparency, this is something I'm interested in because we often talk about transparency as a civil liberties issue. And I believe in transparency very much. And I think it's ridiculous that we don't know a lot of times how credit scores are being calculated, and these for-profit companies can decide to kind of have company secrets and so forth about that. But transparency, you know, it can reveal things that are already kind of cooked in the books, right? So if you say these are the numbers we have, I could have already told you a lot of times how those numbers are probably already indicative of racial and economic inequality, right? And so once we have that data, what do we do with that, with understanding then how we're supposed to actually interpret that data, right? The next question is, does non-racist economic data, right, actually exist, right? I guess, you know, I was so tired when I wrote this sentence out, so it's supposed to say exist at the end of that question, right? Does non-racist economic data? Okay, but does non-racist economic data exist, right? And what I mean by that is, if we say we're going to create an algorithm with data, right? What socioeconomic data out there does not reflect kind of existing racial and economic inequalities? And so, you know, on one hand, I'm not somebody who says data, there's no purpose in using data, right? But if a credit score at the heart is about kind of assessing your character, right? It means then that we're assessing your character on data that is delivered because of already existing racial and economic inequalities. It might mean that we have to kind of reassess what score we're even kind of considering, right? Are we really assessing your character when we're looking at that data? Is there any kind of sign that would resolve existing racial and economic inequalities if we're relying on kind of character models, right? And so part of the question too is can we imagine and build an economy where the need for a credit score is obsolete? I'm very interested in that, right? Is that even possible? All these people are having these debates about what data and kind of algorithms. They assume that a credit score is required. Right now it's essential, right? It really is in a lot of different ways. And this is one of the reasons I like Bernie Sanders' plan in terms of trying to say, how do we make it less essential in terms of different kinds of socioeconomic activity like renting, right? But the question is, can we imagine an economy that is not something that requires a credit score in and of itself? And what would be certain policy initiatives to work towards that? That's what I'm very interested in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Our next speaker is joining us remotely. We've been seeing her in the corner there. Her name is Fran Boait, and she's the Executive Director of Positive Money UK, which is an organization that campaigns for systemic change of the banking system to support a fair, just, and democratic economy. Fran has a PhD in geophysics from Cambridge University and has experience working with a series of international organizations such as the UN and Greenpeace.
And we actually recorded her talk so that if there was a problem with the AV, we'd still have her, but she's listening in and will participate in the question and answer in live time. So.
So I've been asked to talk about digital cash. I just want to kind of set the scene of where that proposal comes from, and why Positive Money thinks it could be a really good idea to make our money and banking system more fair, more democratic, and more sustainable. So obviously in 2008 we had the big crash, the global financial crisis, and for me, my very positive money, that just showed how problematic the design of our financial sector is, how it is self-serving, it is resulting in the rest of the economy serving banks, rather than banks and finance serving the rest of the economy. It's a very fragile system. It actually is unstable by design. And since then, we haven't really seen enough reforms. Policies and politics have been around essentially kind of fiddling around the edges, making sure that when banks fail, they don't fail so disastrously, kind of a risk management approach, rather than how do we actually redesign the system so that it serves the wider economy. And I think the other part where this comes from is, we still have a finance sector which doesn't serve most people. In the US, there are 55 million citizens, I believe, who are unbanked or underbanked. I think that's about 22%, which is crazy. In the UK, it's about 1.53 million. So we have these banks that are too big to fail, too big to jail, still, and the system needs to change. We also saw that whilst the banks were bailed out, the public was sold out. So in the UK, the government, following the crash and severe austerity, really shrinking the size of the public sector, again, for kind of ideological pursuit rather than any fundamental economic reason. And so we don't think that we can really get to a society and an economy that works for most people and also the environment without reforming money and banking. So where do central bank digital currencies come in? Well, what we see when we look at the banking sector is something that is, as I said, too big to fail. And a big part of that is that they control the payment system. So in the UK, 5 big banks have, I think, 85% of the market share. And so if any one of those banks failed in terms of, couldn't make payments to each other, overnight that would seize up the payment system and the whole economy would grind to a halt. So a really key aspect of central bank digital currency is that it would be mean that we could have access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it would be alongside the bank-run payment system, so people could have access. It would be a risk-free alternative to commercial bank deposits. Just to kind of step back a bit, a lot of the work that Positive Money does is around raising the understanding of the money we use. So all of the digital money currently that we use is actually bank deposits created by banks pay loans. That means it's legally banks, it's not ours. And obviously we still use cash, but that is in decline, and that's at risk, which I'll talk a little bit about later. We think of cash as really being the only state currency that we can use, whereas the digital money we use whenever we use our Visa card or we tap to make payments, that's all commercial bank deposits. So a central bank digital currency would actually be offering us a publicly owned currency that we can hold and actually own ourselves. And we think that would make the system a lot more resilient, because it would mean that we don't have to rely on these huge commercial banks to run our payment system. Now, there's a lot of different proposals out there in terms of central bank digital currency. We wrote a paper that we released in the beginning of 2006. We've got another one that we're hoping to release at the beginning of next year, because actually this topic has exploded. And civil society groups like Positive Money thinking about it are very much, not very common. Mostly we have academics thinking of it, but we also have central banks themselves. I think partly as a response to seeing the rise of things like Bitcoin and other forms of currencies, feeling like they actually need to get ahead of technology and think about what a kind of resilient banking and payment system looks like in 10 to 20 years. And what central banks are less good at doing is looking at things from a perspective of trying to make the system fairer, more accessible to everyone, including the unbanked and financially excluded, more resilient in terms of making sure in the long run we have less banking crises and we are not beholden to the big banks, and essentially contributing to a fairer economy. So we feel like that's our role, and so we are developing the proposal we think would be the best to have those outcomes. So, as I mentioned, we think that it should be accessible to all. So there's been various proposals about who would have access to this central bank digital currency. And from our perspective, that's about every citizen having access to it. It doesn't necessarily mean that the bank would administer these accounts. That could be other providers, perhaps some publicly owned, some privately owned. But the actual physical, well not physical, digital cash, just like physical cash, would be 100% risk-free, and it would sit in an account and it wouldn't be used to speculate on like current commercial bank deposits are. Therefore, it would be the kind of state alternative to using commercial bank money to make payments. And as we talked about, that would allow us to have a much more resilient payment system. Now, the other thing is that there's this move to get rid of cash, which Positive Money have also done quite a bit of research on. I think it's quite dangerous because, well, firstly, we think that we should all have the right to make payments in whatever form we prefer. And secondly, if you look at who uses cash, it is predominantly people on lower incomes, potentially people with disabilities, mental health, and for them, the preference of using cash is because it helps them manage their money better. What we see Visa and MasterCard doing globally is trying to actually push everyone into only using commercial bank deposits, digital money. And we've seen an advertising campaign actually called Cash is Awkward, which is pretty, trying to make it kind of have a stigma attached to it. And we have seen some governments looking towards how to get rid of cash completely. Now, regardless of whether central bank digital currency is implemented, we think it's really important that people are allowed to continue to use cash. Because there's many things that we use in society. It's not one size fits all. And whilst in London, everyone might be very happy with going cashless, that just isn't the case in some of the other areas in the UK and at different socioeconomic levels. So we're really keen that we protect cash and resist the move. However, as more people live in urban areas and potentially more people do go cashless, we do think it's important that we aren't just reliant on commercial bank deposits, because lots of reasons for that, but basically, we see a national currency as a natural monopoly. So if that's in private hands, where it can be appeased, where it can be for-profit use, where we've seen the devastating effects of the global financial crisis, that isn't going to have the outcomes we want. So having a publicly owned digital currency, central bank digital currency, will go some way to mitigate the kind of excesses of the private financial sector. And additionally, as I mentioned before, we still see a lot of people unbanked or underbanked, and financial inclusion could be also benefit from a CBDC. So actually, commercial banks often exclude people based on their credit scores or background, whereas a public risk-free bank account with a CBDC could actually go some way to improve financial inclusion, which which we see is really important. And this idea is gaining traction between various academics, talking about it even Lagarde whilst she was head of the IMF, now obviously she's head of the ECB. Very interesting that she actually listed financial inclusion for marginalised communities as one of the reasons that a CBDC might be needed. So that's moving in the right direction, we hope. But one thing quite a lot of cash campaigners talk about is the concern of anonymity. I can never say this word, anonymity. So basically, clearly cash is anonymous. And one of the big things privacy campaigners, a lot of civil society is concerned about is big data harvesting. Now, one thing you could say is, well, when we use these privately operated commercial bank deposits from like Visa and MasterCard, clearly we're also getting our data collected continually. And this is about having that data in the hands of private companies or potentially in the hands of the state or central bank. Now, that's one argument, but I would say the important thing is that, slightly varies from country to country, is that we need to advocate, if this is the direction things are going anyway, we need to advocate for better privacy around making payments in our banking system and our financial data, basically. And that can be much more easily done with a central bank running a CBDC. In the UK, anyway, the central bank is accountable to our parliament, which are elected by people, and so there is a really clear mechanism for understanding the transparency around data. We've also done a bit of work on the different types of data that could be collected and how to go about thinking about how to analyse those different things. And as I said, we have a forthcoming paper coming out next year. So just to kind of conclude, CBDC, isn't some kind of silver bullet, but if it's designed in the right way, it can increase resilience of the payment system and take away the too big to fail power of the big commercial banks. It could also increase financial inclusion and give us access to a public currency in the event of the decline of cash and how we use cash. And it can play a really important part in how we make money in the banking and finance sector serve the rest of the economy, people on the planet, rather than us also in the finance sector. So it's really key that civil society, progressive economists, thoughts are heard on this topic as we see more and more central banks looking into how they would implement CBDC, because obviously it's not, the design is still very much up for debate. So please look out for our forthcoming paper on it next year. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your presentation. And our next speaker is Raul Carrillo, who is the chair of the Modern Money Network Board, a board member of the National Jobs for All Coalition and Our Money. And currently, Raul by day is helping develop a regulatory response to Libra as a policy council at the Manpower Education Fund.
Hi everyone. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Specifically, it's 5 o'clock here, right now. I want to go to the bar, probably worse than you do, but as long as I'm here, you're stuck with me, all right? So you can take about 10 seconds to, depending upon your needs and wants, put your hands in the air, stand up, whatever, but I want to see a little bit more energy in the room. I know it's the end of a long week, but I promise this is going to be as interesting as you make it. Thanks for the wave, Jeff. Okay, so I'm going to touch on some things that we don't normally talk about in MMT spaces. So I'm going to talk about quasi-sovereignty. I'm going to talk about quasi-banking. I'm going to talk about quasi-money, all that flows from corporate power. And I'm going to talk about the implications that this has on our lives as just people living in the world. And I'm going to try to do that through an MMT lens. As I do that, I hope that everybody keeps in mind the last two presentations that we heard, especially Tamara's notes about how data is being collected from folks and the ways in which that is discriminatory. Fran's notes about how the payment system is overwhelmed by banking power as opposed to public power. And then I want to keep the focus on anonymity and we want to not be surveyed in the back of everybody's minds. So first, what I'm going to do is just explain how I got into all of this very quickly. Most of you know me as director of one of the directors of the Modern Money Network, the current board chair. But by day, my practice as a lawyer involves chasing after financial predators. Above all, following in the footsteps of the gentleman in the back there, Mr. Black, who is sitting next to Scott Cole at the black table. The black back table, Mr. Bill Black table. And so, right out of law school, I served as a special counsel to the enforcement director at the CFPB, and it was there that I started learning a little bit about fintech and what was happening to people, especially in terms of online lending and scoring and what Tamara was talking about. Then I spent 3 years on the ground as a direct services attorney at New Economy Project in New York City, where we had a hotline where people had a problem with a lender, with a bank, with a debt collector, with a landlord. They could pick up the phone and call, right? And over time, I started to get more and more calls that were related to usurious loans that people got on their phones, for instance, where they didn't even read through the privacy policy, maybe it didn't exist, etc. Then started getting into the payment space. There has been an effort in New York City to put smart chips on ID cards that were initially for folks who may not have ID for specific reasons. So we're talking about the most vulnerable folks living in the city, undocumented workers, people who've had changes in their personal life that they don't necessarily want other people to know about, et cetera, et cetera. So I've kind of had the benefit of seeing things from a variety of perspectives, as well as working on fintech scholarship, sort of, so to speak, with Ramon and other folks in the network. Now I work with Demand Progress, which is an anti-surveillance and internet freedom group based in DC. They support the breakup of Facebook, and it's good. Over here, thank you. Elimination. Okay, that's how we all know each other. Never mind. Okay. So, but what we're trying to do with a consortium of other groups, including financial reform groups in the Capitol, is figure out how to stop what seems like a terrible, terrible thing coming down the pipeline. And I mean this in a good way, but it's going to look even more terrible if you know MMT. Okay, some just quick recaps. Tamara and Fran touched on a bunch of this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Just what is fintech? In case you're wondering, it's financial technology, right? But specifically, when people use it in a modern day context, they're most often talking about automating parts of finance, right? That may involve the use of artificial intelligence or machine learning. That may involve new shiny algorithms. It may not. Anything can be classified as financial technology. Paul Volcker, as much as I dislike him, has a line that says, in which he says, financial innovations have occurred throughout history. The last interesting one was the ATM. That's kind of how I feel today. We have all kinds of companies with lots of money in Silicon Valley trying to automate all kinds of processes. We talked about debt or lending and scoring. It also extends to financial management, managing wealth, payday products, insurance, coins, which we'll discuss in much detail soon, exchanges for those coins, even automated fintech software to prevent fraud. I consider blockchain really just a fraud prevention tool at the end of the day, or that's what it's supposed to be. But all around the country and the world, really, you have folks who are trying to take functions that banks or other financial institutions have previously used and make those into something new, quicker, more fast, efficient, shiny, etc. And lots of people in power are very much obsessed with all of this, which is very bad, in my opinion. Okay, just a quick review of surveillance. Luckily, again, Tamara touched on a lot of this. I just, throughout our discussion of the Libra project, want to make clear that data is not something that you can get away from anymore, right? We live in a computerized society. We live in an internet of things. People have smart appliances. Even the smart energy grids that a lot of folks want to build through the Green New Deal are going to measure, where I am in my apartment. Like, am I getting up and going to the bathroom? Like, what's my, bladder tracks like? Like, they're going to know things like that, or have the ability to know things like that. Do I want to curb that sort of information from being gathered? Of course. But this is very much baked into how society functions at this point. Most surveillance or most data production is very mundane, right? It's just you use a computer or a computerized thing, you create a record, and usually the company keeps a copy of that record for a certain amount of time, right? Some of them keep it forever, some of them, quote unquote, delete them after a few months, it depends. But we are constantly making records of our activity throughout the day. Thus, it is relatively easy to be surveilled. We're buying into it, right? We can have a whole conversation about Edward Snowden and surveillance by the NSA. And I'd like, hopefully in the QA, to touch back on the questions about the credit registry that Tamara brought up. But most surveillance that happens in the United States, at least, is corporate surveillance. It's you clicking through a privacy policy or just visiting the internet, right? And going to a site. And without you even necessarily knowing the extent of the damage, a company is collecting information about you. It is putting it into a portfolio about you. It is cross-referencing that portfolio with another portfolio that's brought from a different company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this goes on constantly. Financial data is particularly bothersome for reasons you might imagine, right? So right now, Facebook knows what you like, right? That's the big thing. It also knows when you're talking to friends. It also knows who tends to support your political views, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't necessarily know what you do unless you are surfing the web, right? But with financial data, it would have more of a sense of where you go throughout the day, what kind of choices you're making with your money, obviously, compared to others. And it's very intimate data in a way that a lot of people don't recognize, I think. So keep that in mind. Now we're going to talk about the Libra project. So for those of you who didn't read Rohan's great op-ed in The Nation this summer, I'll kind of just walk through the pieces. So Libra is trying to, Facebook has a subsidiary called Calibra. It is a digital wallet that can contain digital coins, right? Its version of money. Libra is the unit of account. It is also a member of something called the Libra Association, which includes about 23 other companies that controls a payments ecosystem through which these coins flow, right? There are actually a variety of different instruments that are involved within the Libra ecosystem. Coins are one, that's the bearer instrument for everyday people. Then there are investment tokens that are arguably securities, there are certificates, there are a few other things rolling around that we know of thus far. Coins are the most important for the purposes of today's discussion, just because coins are most likely the things that you and I would hold if this were ever to see the light of day. So it runs on blockchain, kind of. Those of you who know a little bit about blockchain know that blockchain is a distributed ledger system. So it's a way to keep track of information that is supposedly anonymous and decentralized. The Facebook Libra project would run what's called a permission blockchain, meaning that it would not be open like other cryptocurrencies. There would be 24 entities, each in charge of a node that talks to each other, that creates the record of transactions that have happened within the payments ecosystem. So the people who are in control of the nodes are the members of the Libra Association, and you can see over here on the right. So you'll notice that this is a laundry list of, first of all, major credit card companies, rideshare companies, coin exchanges, Spotify, eBay, payments processors, all kinds of different folks with a gloss of various NGOs, microfinance organizations, etc. It's basically like if all the progressive neoliberal organizations sat down at a table that in Geneva, Switzerland, coincide strong banking regulation. That's what the Libra Association is. And the Libra Association, for better or worse, with some differences, and I know colleagues are going to kill me about this later, but just think of it as the central bank of the system for now, right? The Libra Association can change any part of the system with a 2/3 vote. So Facebook nominally only has 1 vote, but it also brought everybody to the table and is arguably the biggest company over here, right? If you look at the folks that are in the Libra Association, you'll notice one very singularly important fact. No banks, right? Because the point is that Silicon Valley is coming for the bank's lunch, or supposedly that's been the case for years. What often happens is a lot of the startups wind up selling the functionality to the banks, but I don't necessarily see Facebook doing that, given its reach. I should explain how the points work. Right, so say you have a wallet. What you do is you put fiat currency into that wallet. In exchange, you get Libra coins, right? Facebook takes your fiat currency and it either invests it in securities or other foreign currencies, or potentially a basket of commodities. It is called the stable coin in the sense that it's not as volatile as Bitcoin. It's not a straight up commodity like a tulip that just waves in the wind. It actually has a backing and can be seen as a tertiary layer of our existing banking system, right? It is anchored predominantly by the US dollar. It will also be anchored probably by the yen, the euro, the renminbi, a few others. And you can go and get your fiat currency back at any given point in time from an authorized reseller, but it's not guaranteed how much you'll get back, right? So essentially the Libra has an exchange rate with the currencies that back it up, which is interesting and leads to a bunch of interesting macroeconomic dynamics that we won't discuss right now. But you can consider it as a currency board operation, for those of you who follow that space. For those of you who follow coins, it is something like a stable coin, but just a little bit more complicated given that it's backed by an entire basket of securities. The Libra Reserve is controlled, of course, by the Libra Association. Proceeds that come out of the Libra Reserve are distributed to the owners of the Libra Association, right? So you get to use Libra, but if there's a profit to be made, so to speak, off of the money that you handed to the Libra Association, you don't get that. You just get to use Libra, and that's good for you, or should be good enough, according to the Libra Association. All right. So that's a lot, especially if you haven't been following fintech. So I'm going to take away 2 layers right now, and I'm going to do that with the help of Professor Angela Walsh, who has been part of MMN's crypto series. If you go find that on the internet now, I think. If not, we have a backlog, and it'll be up there soon. And if you want to help us with the backlog, that would be great. Professor Walsh has this whole thesis about how blockchain is often unnecessary in a lot of things, right? But what blockchain has become in our social imaginary is this idea of privacy, right? This idea of decentralization. And so people throw it out there and say, oh yeah, we do blockchain too. So that you're supposed to feel like, ooh, I'm like protected in a cool way. And maybe there's actually no economic substance to that whatsoever. Walsh calls this the veil of decentralization. And Facebook is very much operating under that. In fact, the veil of decentralization is so thin for the Libra project that other cryptocurrency projects have rebelled against Facebook, and rightly so. They think, how can you hold true to the spirit of encrypting information and hiding things from the government and corporate power when you just got slammed for $5 billion in privacy fees for the Cambridge Analytica scandal? So there's a wedge between crypto and between the Libra project, and we're about to find out why. The major thesis that I'm submitting is that Libra is trying to function like a monetary sovereign, right? It can't quite do that, but it can get pretty close. Fadl talked about a spectrum of monetary sovereignty, right? And within that, we're not just talking about countries. We are talking about entities that can exert power on others, right? Make people pay a price for not participating within the monetary system. There's a quote from a great legal realist we like to follow there. There's a government when one person or group can tell others what they must do, and when those others may have to obey or suffer a penalty. That is what makes a feature of sovereignty, right? And so, while Facebook is certainly not a legal sovereign yet, what it is a giant, powerful legal entity that can take on some of the functions that are usually reserved from the state, because the penalties for exclusion from Facebook, people don't like those, right? Okay, so this is actually going to get back to a lot of what Tamara was saying, right? So Facebook, like all other Silicon Valley startups, released this huge white paper that talks about how it's going to save the world, and Zuckerberg's going to come in with a cape, and all the underbanked will be banked, and all those who have slow payments will have fast payments, and he's just doing it because he's a real good guy, right? It's going to create a currency of currencies that will empower billions of people across the world, right? Billions. And this is all framed in the context of financial inclusion, which I would agree is predatory inclusion, as in many of these other entities that we see. And here's a quote by David Marcus, who's the head of the Libra Project, former head of Facebook Messenger down here, which he said just a couple of weeks ago. This Libra could be an instrument of development which allows the free world of the Western nations to preserve the influence that, in my opinion, is necessary to maintain a good balance in the world. So just remember that's the kind of person we're looking at, running this sort of operation here. And that becomes more important later on when we talk a little bit about what's going on in China. Okay, so indulge me in the thesis that Mark Zuckerberg wants to dominate the world, right? And that MMTers know that being a monetary sovereign is probably pretty helpful in doing that, right? How would he go about doing that? Well, let's go back to our MMT basics, right? This is a quote from me. It's my presentation, so I get to throw it out there. But basically, this is going back to Robert Lee Hale, that legal whiz we mentioned earlier, who says that it is a field of coercion that drives people to work, right? MMTers know that coercion doesn't just drive people to work in a vacuum. It drives people to work for currency, right? For money, which can be used to settle debts, private, but most importantly, public, right? And it drives the usage of a particular unit of payment, not only through debt, but through taxes, maybe the chief debt, right? And through fines, fees, and tort risk, all kinds of contractual arrangements that boil down to essentially political power. Okay, I also want folks, before we launch into what we could possibly do, to remember the historical examples behind our taxes drive money thesis, right? So here you've got Matt Forstater, if you haven't ever read his paper on primitive accumulation in East Africa, I strongly recommend it. The point of taxing the farmers in East Africa was not, at that point, to raise revenue. It was to get them to start cultivating cash crops rather than subsistence crops, right? Because that was what was important for the Germans who were colonizing East Africa at that point, right? So when you think about big tech companies creating their own currencies, think a little bit about what they're actually trying to get people to do, because they don't need the money either. Facebook doesn't need the money. And certainly, Facebook does not need its own Libra back. It already took your dollars, remember? Okay. And then here's another small quote from a paper that folks might not be so familiar with. Kay-Sue Park is a law professor at Georgetown who wrote a truly incredible article called Mortgage Money and the Conquest of the Americas. And she talks about how when English colonists first got to New England, they took advantage of confusion about what money was, confusion about what property was, on their own part with respect to indigenous values, to seize land, right, to take land and to eventually use mortgages for foreclosures. Case Park has a whole narrative about how this happened, about how the entire US mortgage system actually arose from this clash of what money meant, and from there it was used to take things from people. And so, to the folks who were there in New England before they even got there, it was inconceivable that there was anything that they could do that was with money, with all these tokens we're exchanging, that would involve the surrender of land. Now, when we think about Silicon Valley, think about people not really knowing how fiat money works, definitely not knowing how crypto money works, and then realizing that all their data has been stolen, right? This is an imperial technique. This is a technique of domination. This is how a legal entity acts when it wants to create a code that it replicates across the entire world, right? This is what dominators act like. Here are some examples from the recent press around Libra that I think lend credence to this thesis. So, up top we have Isabella Kaminska, who's a great financial journalist at the FT, talking about how Libra operates on what's called a closed loop system. Our credit cards in our pockets, those of us who use credit cards, operate on what's called an open loop. There's a reason Visa is called Visa. It's because you can take it anywhere and use it, wherever you want to be, right? You can cross boundaries constantly. Like, it's not dependent upon the other political sovereigns, insofar as they let Visa be used to pay for things in their country, etc., right? But that's almost every country. Closed loops, creating an ecosystem with which you can only buy certain things, like within Facebook, within WhatsApp. WhatsApp is on my Facebook now, right? It's WhatsApp, Instagram, etc. That is actually a smart closed loop, because Facebook, that network, has billions of customers, right? Billions of people. We are talking about if the currency were to be started by Facebook, it would immediately have a customer base that is almost instantaneous. You would wake up one day, you would log into your Facebook account, and you would say a screen that says, like, click X to opt out of Libra. And, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But it's important to realize that, again, this is the creation, this is all about power, right? As Kaminska says. Then we have the BIS down here in June. See, everybody came in to respond after Facebook announced, saying that they're worried that big tech companies could eventually force loan repayments by threatening to hurt people via other parts of the ecosystem, right? So there, the BIS actually has Amazon in mind, right? And hurting people on the platform who don't want to deal in Amazon coin, which has not taken off, and I'm not very worried about now, except when I remember it exists when I'm not thinking about Libra. But the point is that, say Facebook were to have a Libra project take off, and one day, you're thinking about getting a Libra, but you haven't yet, and then you don't, and then you just forget about it for a while. Then it wants to bring you back in to use this method of payment, right? It has a lot of information about you. It has built-in collateral, so to speak, right? There are all kinds of things that it has that force you to take its demands more seriously, right? You've spent your whole life, maybe, your whole adult life, and recording information in it. Maybe you've recorded your children's information in it. It's not the kind of entity you want as a lender, right? That's not who you want as your creditor, someone who knows your most intimate details. Seems like common sense, right? So, what would the Libra Association need to start just throwing out loans in Libra at you on Facebook in terms of advertisements? What would the Libra Association need to do to screw around with the value of Libra relative to the dollar? What would it need to do to impose a financial transaction tax on what you do with Libra? The answer is a 2/3 vote by that Libra Association that we talked about earlier, which is 24 corporations that all like Facebook. Okay. So, imperialism by stealth. This was in the title of the presentation for a reason. And the credit goes to, again, Ms. Kaminska and her co-author, Claire Jones, in the Financial Times, because they've been doing a series called Breaking the Zuck Buck that I would encourage everybody to follow. It's on FT Alphaville, which is free and not paywall, thank God. But it talks about what would happen if Libra were to take off in countries that have quote unquote weak currencies. And I'm simplifying, and I'm seeing Nathan give a grimace back there. But we can get into that later. The point is, Libra is going to be most attractive where the payment system is weak, right? Where people are having trouble with the fiat currency. They're going to start buying into the loop, right? They're going to become part of Facebook's growing list of countries that are all participating in this payments ecosystem for which the price of which is constant surveillance. If that's not imperialism, I'm not really sure what is. Facebook will also be able to switch out the basket of currencies in order to affect the value of other currencies from time to time. Again, it only needs a 2/3 vote. And it will be changing the values of some currencies which denominate the debts of those very people who are unbanked and financially excluded, et cetera, right? Just because you don't have a bank account does not mean you're not in debt to a bank. We can talk about that later if anybody has a question about that. And then here's Katarina Pistor, who is a law professor at Columbia, talking about how if there's a lack of trust in the banking system in a specific country, people might want to just shove their fiat currency into the Libra Association and get Libra back out, right? And you could collapse a very small banking system in that way. Okay, so that was all interesting and cool money and stuff. But we gotta keep our eyes on the price. And there's a young man on the left here, who again I looked to as a regular, who had some very interesting commentary about Libra just a couple of months ago. So Mr. Bill Black right here said that Libra is not like a shadow bank, it is a shadow bank. It is taking your money and then it is doing all kinds of crazy things on the back end, and because you don't the money that you put in doesn't necessarily fit the legal definition of a deposit, it gets to run around not being regulated, right? Hopefully, I and others will fix that, but as of now, it seems like it's very much headed in that direction. Congratulations if you followed along that way. It took me weeks and weeks and weeks to arrive at Team Shadow Bank. I may switch allegiance back to Team Exchange Traded Fund. Everybody who's looking at the Libra project thinks it's a different thing, right? If you're a securities lawyer, you think it's an investment company. If you work with derivatives, you think it is a giant money market fund, et cetera, et cetera. For now, I'm with Bill on Team Shadow Bank. But the real important thing is what Bill says right here. Remember, almost all the really biggies, what they're really doing is not whatever the surface thing is that they tell us. I've been talking about Libra for probably way too long right now. Does anybody know what the most important financial product within the Libra project is? You can raise your hand, offer a guess. Coin, wallet, investment token, payments. What's that?
Data.
Yes, it's the data. It's us. It's our behavior, right? That's what they're getting at with this. They're giving us chits, right? Taking our fiat currency, and then they're spying on us, right? For the privilege of continuing to use the currency within this giant closed loop system they're creating to encapsulate the earth. Panopticon is a phrase that Rohan coined. Ouch.
Sorry.
It's actually expensive. But just want to be clear about just how bad this is. So there's a quote from Sally Almirova, who I believe Nathan referenced earlier as the co-author of the Finance Franchise with Bob Pocket. She has a paper on New Deal financial regulation compared to financial regulation in the era of fintech, and talks about fintech just being a giant system for constant self-referential growth, right? So who knows what's going to happen if billions of people start using Libra? What kind of derivatives will we see? What kind of bets, just generally, will we see on the use of Libra on its rise and fall? How many other kinds of markets would pop up in Libra? And how badly would that entrench the system? These are things we have to think about. privacy-wise, again, I don't know why anyone would ever trust Facebook after what we've seen from them. But it's very important to know that Facebook is not even doing the usual niceties when it comes to explaining a privacy policy, right? Their white paper is essentially a giant middle finger on privacy, right? As one might expect. It said that, it's not going to know who the users are because, blockchain, except that we know who the users are going to be. You're going to wake up in the morning and you're going to see a notification on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp asking you to come into the system, right? At first asking you at least. And so we know that most of the initial users are going to be people who are already within the social media network, right? Those are going to be the participants within the payment system. Similarly, the Libra Association has promised that data won't flow from Libra to Facebook. So your financial transaction data in the wallet won't go to the social media network. It hasn't said anything about the inverse direction at all. So the wallet could wind up with your social media data as well as your financial transaction data, right? Maybe they'll, freak out about this and, come say something later. But for now, that's where we're at. And most importantly, it has again said nothing about third parties. There's a massive data broker industry. There's a massive data miner industry. There's a massive data scraper industry. Data and information about us is being sold and resold all the time. Companies collect data even though they don't know what to do with it. They figure, we have this about, Bob, and we have this about Alice, and, we have it. One day it might be useful. Whether it's for blackmail, whether it's to sell to a medical insurance company, whether it's to sell to a bank, we don't know. The rules around this are all embarrassingly thin. There's no real federal privacy law in this country, right? And Facebook knows that. In some countries, it's a little bit better. Europe is going to this property rights-based approach, which perhaps we can discuss in the Q&A. But for the most part, regulators around the world are not at all ready for this. Just two more examples of privacy harms that can occur here. So, folks might know a little bit about the Chinese social credit system, right? Or have heard a little bit about it and how it bears some similarities to what's going on in the United States, but maybe some things that are a little bit scarier, right? So there's all kinds of consumer reporting. There's all kinds of behavior reporting that goes on in the US under the auspices of corporations. In China, folks are starting to receive a single score that is not only a credit score with alternative data, as Tamara was talking about. Well, it is a credit score with alternative data. That alternative data includes things like how nice you are to people, and like how good you are taking care of your family, and which kind of restaurants you frequent. The one thing that it doesn't do, as of now, to my understanding, is engage in what's called peer scoring. And what that means is looking at the scores of your other friends to use that to weigh down your score or perhaps give you a boost, and vice versa, right? Facebook patented that sort of thing a few years ago, right? People were afraid that Facebook was going to start offering a credit score, and it was going to take into account, basically how actually your friends are on Facebook, in addition to yourself, right? So they already have this technology, and it's sitting there, and people need to remember that despite this alleged firewall between Facebook and the rest of the currency project. I see that essentially as redlining. We know what's going to happen with these biased algorithms. Tamara talked a lot about how can we have not racist economic data? I don't know, but this does not give me any confidence with respect to that set of questions at all. The other thing I want to make clear again is that what's going on here is, again, the payments provider, potentially the creditors, this combination of social media and financial institution is going to know a lot about you in ways that you don't even know about you, right? I would be surprised if I took as close track as my Facebook habits as Facebook did, for instance, right? It knows my patterns. Once it has my bank account information, it knows what I want to do. And it's almost a built-in collateral to every loan were it to lend that it always has just a little bit of blackmail on me, you know? And that's something to consider. Okay. The last thing, last slide, I promise. So this is also fairly scary, although with a bit of a ray of hope. And this thought comes from a conversation with Nathan Tingus last night. But so basically, for those of you who have not been following the crisis with respect to digital identity and especially identity verification in the United States, social security numbers are everywhere. Your social security number is not really very secret. I promise you, several companies, data brokers, etc. have it, right? And so the ID system in the United States is breaking down. And several companies are speaking about what to do about that, right? Can they supply a unique identifier? Can they supply an ID that is based on the portfolio of data that they happen to have on you, right? Facebook wants to create the new global digital identity. And David Marcus has said as much about that, right? So we have a bunch of corporations in a free-for-all, and Facebook figures that if it has a currency system, that gives them that much more leverage in that race, right? So what we have is corporations trying to create identities, right? Anyone can create an identity. It's just the problem of who's going to accept it, right? Yeah. I like these guys, yeah. Okay. That's a Minsky joke. Anyway. So the state is supposed to be the issuer of an identity, right? One would expect that it knows who you are better than Facebook would, right? But does it? Does it now? Who would have greater surveillance powers if Facebook got something like the Libra Project, right? I say this is wildcat identification because there was a period in 19th century banking history in which there was no federal banking law, essentially, right? This was before the Civil, this was between Andrew Jackson's failure and the Civil War, right? And there were lots of state regulations, but they were all kind of gobbledygook and not harmonized. And there was pretty much an absence of federal regulation again, right? That was called wildcat banking, because you had people just doing all kinds of crazy things. I think that's essentially the stage that we're in right now. I think one issue in which we might be able to catch Facebook's Libra project or a similar project is in that it is saying, because of the blockchain, that it's going to protect everybody's privacy by not confirming the real world identity. If you know anything about Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering laws, you know that that is a big, big, big no-no. And that's a potential for, international collaboration based on not only national security interests, but other interests to kind of sort of keep this in check. And God forbid that I'm here crying for the international financial cops to come save us, but that is something to consider when we're talking about this layer, at least. So that's a lot. Hopefully we can talk about some of it in how it relates to MMT in the Q&A. I think Rohan's going to touch on some of it as well. I just want to leave with the thought that if Facebook's motto is move fast and break things, like monetary policy, like people's identity, etc., then we have to be even quicker than them, and we have to create alternatives, and Rohan's about to talk about exactly this.
Thank you, Raul. And now our last speaker of the day, Rohan Grey.
Great. I'll try and keep it as brief as humanly possible, which is not easy for me. I know when it comes to thinking about the future, there's probably an hour time frame where beyond that it doesn't really matter what's going on, because that's really what matters right now. But often to understand the future, we also need to understand the past. And one thing I've always loved about modern monetary theory is that people think modern means the last 20 years or last 100 years or something. And to the extent that that word means something beyond just what somebody chose to assign in a blog once and then it stuck, it's a reference to a Keynes quote that says that modern money has been a creature of the state for the last 4,000 years. So we take a pretty long-term view of what modernity means when it comes to our understanding of the currency system, but it's still modern. That means there's still something maybe different 5,000 years or 10,000 years before that means that we're still grounding our understanding of money in a historicity, a period of time, an epoch, even if it is a very big epoch. The epoch that kind of resembles that on the timescale of human evolution is the epoch in which we learn how to write. Human history goes a long way back before we learned how to write. But once we started doing that, things changed pretty quickly in a bunch of pretty fundamental ways. I have been getting increasingly into technology thanks to various inspirational mentors in my life, and the fact that my father was also a scientist and technologist who cut his teeth as a lawyer drafting telecommunications laws in the 1980s. So my mother was a music teacher, my father was a lawyer, and I became a music teacher, and now I'm a lawyer who works on technology. So I guess you could say that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But what I think is really interesting in this period is not cable TV. It's something far more important, it's the internet. The internet is to communications what I am contending digital money is going to be to money. And both are as fundamental to the way that our brains work and interact with each other as writing was. We are building a central nervous system that connects every brain in this room in a way that we built a nervous system to connect a bunch of otherwise disparate meat bags and other weird kind of looking things in our body. And that nervous system is working out what it looks like, what it's going to do, and which parts are going to be in charge right now in live time. If we don't make the right decisions, it's going to end up pretty bad for certain parts of that otherwise holistic organism. Michael Hudson, one of the early ancient historians of MMT, traces the rise of modern money to the administrative state. Bureaucrats who kept records of things, priests and then lawyers, knew exactly who owned what and who was who. And it was very important if you were one person or another and exactly what you owed. The king or the pharaoh might have been the face of that system, but you can be damn sure it was the lawyers and the scribes who kept it running on a daily basis. So in that sense, I don't really have a good retort to Shakespeare's suggestion that you should first kill all the lawyers, other than hopefully not be sort of last in line or something. And as Tamara notes, it's also really important because the more people control your identity or can tell you who you are, the more they can control who you are, where it matters, which is in social life. Somebody can spread a rumor that you're untrustworthy. That's going to do more damage to whether people trust you than anything you can say about how trustworthy you might be. And Laura mentioned power as technological as well. And obviously she's right, but she also used one of my favorite examples, which is the mobile phone audio jack. It's such a great example because it's almost the closest to a kind of modern Frankensteinian moment that we've all actually got to experience. What started off as this sort of dumb thing, kind of very powerful actually. The ability to take music that used to be a social experience and suddenly put it in your ears and had nobody be able to share it but you, was very powerful. And the idea that that jack was connecting you to 20,000 songs every time you plugged your earphones in was something very powerful that you controlled. Suddenly that dumb little jack became smart. And suddenly became a thing to be scared of, because not only can it tell you no, you don't get to listen to that music today, but it can also monitor your heart rate. It can monitor the pulses that go in your ear. It can see what things get you kind of a little excited. And then it can tell that to the people who might want to sell you the next kind of music, or maybe sell you something at the club that night and work out what kind of playlist is going to get that for you. So there's something kind of scary about the idea that suddenly these dumb machines are becoming smart. And when it comes to money, I'm very scared of smart money. Usually things that are more smart are more good. We like smart coal or smart technology. I guess maybe we don't like smart coal. We like smart technology in general. But the idea that we like smart money, we shouldn't like smart money, is maybe a bit counterintuitive. So I'll give you a couple of examples. If you want to buy drugs, if you want to buy sex, if you want to buy maybe some political freedom by funding a movement that some people are going to call terrorists until you win, at which point they're going to call you liberators, then you might want to have some monetary freedom from the people who currently are in power. And some of those things are also pretty fun, but I'm not going to go into that in too much detail now. If you're the kind of person that's maybe afraid of being falsely accused of something when it's too late, once they shoot first and ask questions later to prove your innocence, then the fact that they can infer guilt from your money or from your economic behavior becomes a very, very real source of danger. Of course, if you're the abductors of the Lindbergh baby, you may be actually guilty, and in that situation, maybe barcodes on paper money are useful because we can track when people do bad things. Or maybe the lesson there is if you're going to commit crimes with money, you might use coins instead because coins don't have barcodes and are actually far more anonymous. And in that sense, maybe we should all be kind of hoping for a bit more coinage in our day-to-day basis, even if it does produce a few risks on the way. But I'm thankful money isn't a snitch, isn't a rat, because when I used to use pocket money that my mother gave me for other things to buy extra chocolates, which I'm probably still paying for today, that was a choice that I had to make and live with and make my peace with God. I didn't have to worry that the money would call my mother the next morning and get me in trouble. And if I choose somehow, by some grace of God, to end up having more than $10,000 and to try to take that money on a plane, it's not going to call the TSA on me and get me stranded in a room. The TSA is going to have to do the work to find that money somewhere hidden, assuming I can actually get access to that amount of money. And that means that the police have to do the work to catch criminals, rather than criminals have to do the work to constantly hide from ever-expanding police powers. So you see this even in cases where there's no crime involved, when there's benevolence involved, and that's probably even scarier, actually. In Australia, the government, out of their depths of their concerned heart, are creating a new kind of welfare card for Indigenous Aboriginals who they think kind of don't spend their money the right way, too much booze, too much not on the things that they should be doing. And so as a result, that money can only be used, in the most part, on things that the government decides are the kind of good savings in life. So those kind of situations where, at least for me, money can be, sometimes smart money can be too smart. And as Tamara noted earlier, sometimes smart credit can be way too smart as well. So I do a lot of work around digital currency design. I work with central bankers to set regulatory standards. I work with technologists who are trying to develop digital currency technologies that do preserve privacy and freedom for individuals, and work with people who are involved with international development in places where these developments are happening already. Often it's the big established financial systems that are the last ones to come to these questions, because when a thing is good enough for them, why break it? I do it because I don't think that economic and technological freedoms can be clearly distinguished. And I do it because I think it's good to be able to predict problems and solve them. In fact, that's actually why I'm here as well. MMT is valuable to me because it predicted and provided answers to huge structural problems to other people or other ideas. It was valuable because it recognized that to understand money, you had to understand its role in history and its place in history. And of course, it was valuable because people like Bill saw very early on that the new kinds of technologies that enable us to come together in ways that historically we haven't give us the potential to disrupt existing modes of ideas. But the economy has many layers. We have not just income. Obviously, it's always good to have more if you don't have enough. And it's not just equality or even sustainability. It's also free. If you have a Green New Deal, but one in which every other country has to buy intellectual property from the United States, that's great for exactly one country, and really, really bad for everybody else. Similarly, and this is something I wrote in an article a long time ago called Who Owns the Intellectual Fruits of Job Guarantee? You may have a job, but if that job comes with your employer knowing exactly where you are all the time, because you're part of an employee data retention system to create smarter work situations, and everything you produce is privately owned, so that if I want to remix a song produced by Job Guarantee artists, I have to seek 15 different permissions, or end up getting sued like Napster, or like Metallica did to 12-year-olds who learned the wrong lesson about sharing in primary school, apparently. And if you want to have a job, but also don't want your employer to know exactly when you go to the bathroom and which number it is, you might be shit out of luck, unless there's a way for you to have an economic identity that isn't tied to your data. So is it good enough just to fix the banks? No, I think as Fran argued, there are really big problems with relying on entities whose job is to try and make money at your expense to look after your interests. And as developing countries have shown, the idea that if it ain't broke, don't fix it is just not enough. It is broken, and they're going to try and fix it anyway. So the question is only which fix. And the fix is in right now. So we should do something about it because Libra knows what's up, but also JP Morgan knows what's up. And the idea that we can just sort of improve and fix this system is increasingly untenable because the power that they have and are exerting is exponential. They are not simply geometrically more powerful than they were last year. They're exponentially more powerful and continue to be so. So we've got a limited time frame before it becomes too late to actually do anything about this. Dirk talked about the fall of the Berlin Wall earlier. Well, partially that was because there were people who decided that they'd had enough and they weren't going to shoot. If you put a robot on that wall, it's going to shoot every time. And at that point, it's too late. So we've got a limited time before the walls that matter are going to be staffed with enough robots that they're never going to stop shooting. And that's the time frame that we have to think about the questions we're dealing with now. And there are two options. One, we can do nothing, and then the result will be more enclosure, more rent-seeking, more surveillance, and more control. What's called Libra, the preemptive privatization of a global monetary layer that doesn't exist yet. I still pretty much hold that view. The alternative is a world where we start to take it back. I like coins, metaphorically, because there's something you can put in your pocket. There's something a child can put in their pocket. You can't do that with a central bank. But this is a sort of physically or digitally, it's a little chunk of freedom you get to take back from the collective, even while recognizing that its value is still ultimately derived from its collective. But say you're the kind of person that does care about the future, that's why you're at a conference like this. You care about getting the technicals right, and you care about doing the right thing. Or maybe you're a hacker in the 1970s and you've realized that Bill Gates is trying to destroy the mode of sharing-based production that had existed in the software community up until that point, and replace it with walled gardens that still exist today. In both situations, what are you going to do? Well, you've got a few options. One is you try and sound the alarm. Maybe you get kicked out of the country and have to go to Russia. One is you try and find other people who also think the same way and try and work together. Maybe you get branded as terrorists or criminals. Maybe you try and identify and condemn the bad guys. But what if the bad guys are also the good guys in other situations? I had a lefty economist who I had quite a lot of respect for in general, who doesn't normally get frazzled, once blocked me because I suggested that putting all of our data in a social security system might not actually be that good. And he thought I was attacking social security, which obviously I wasn't. But he was so upset at the idea I could criticize social security as sort of inherently totalitarian that the rest of the conversation was over by that point. So if we're standing here and saying the government can be the thing that fixes the Green New Deal, and the public spending can be the thing that fixes poverty and inequality and addresses private power, but simultaneously it's the most dangerous threat to the future of our freedom of anything that we can think of, then we have to reconcile that tension in a way, and I'm not sure we've kind of got an answer for it yet. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, in this situation so far, the conversation has mostly taken place among central bankers who do like to control everything and get more data, but they don't really know how much power they have in this situation because they're used to dealing with financial actors, and the idea that they're actually becoming a sort of technology sector is still a bit novel to them. But what we need to do is articulate a public alternative that's sort of viable and vibrant and big, that becomes the center of the conversation, not this legal crowd. That's what the Green New Deal did, and that's why it's been so successful. And when it comes to money, that's what MMT did. MMT said, it doesn't matter how these little amounts you can get from private taxes or anything else, or private wealth taxes. It's the infinity sign that matters. It's the big infinity sign above the rest of the monetary system. That's the ball game. If we win that, we win. So when it comes to monetary privacy, when it comes to technology, what is the ball game? What is the infinity sign? I don't have a strong answer for that yet, but I think we need a couple of things at the very least. First of all, we just need more damn money. If you're poor, we just need more of what it represents. But we also need public bank accounts. We also need some form of public credit that, as Tamara said, is dumb. It isn't about knowing you so far to your core that the precogs in Minority Report, it's going to declare you a killer before you even realize why you're going to become one. You don't want that kind of credit. You want the kind of credit that says, yeah, we'll take a chance on you because you're a human being and you deserve to have a chance taken on you every now and again. But we also need cash. We also need money that is as dumb as it can possibly be and then a little dumber. We need the kind of thing that works the way that money works in our pipes. Doesn't ask what I'm using it for. Water works in our pipes, sorry. Doesn't ask what we're using the water for, it just provides it. Doesn't ask what we're using electricity for, it just provides it. And in that sense, it's a public utility because its job is to provide a service and a resource and let us decide how we want to use it within confines decided by what are social considerations. But we also need the internet to serve us, and this is the argument that I want to kind of land on in a monetary conference. We love to talk about central bank balance sheets. We love to talk about operational dynamics. We love to think that we are technically sophisticated and that's why we have an edge. And all that's true. But when it comes to digital money, it's as much about the word digital as it is about the word money. You need to understand the hardware. So maybe what you want to be thinking about is a little tiny box. Costs $20 maybe, $5 maybe. You plug it in, it's the size of a phone charger at home, and it's your cloud. Not a cloud up there, which really means down in a basement in Utah in a Google farm server somewhere. But a cloud that exists in your own home, and if anyone wants to try and get that information, you can get it down and search for it. And maybe you want to back that up in 5 of your friends' houses. It's like Voldemort, but he had more friends as a kid. So if your house burns down, you have your entire digital identity backed up with 5 people who you trust. Or maybe you break it up between them so that none of them can really screw you even if they tried to. Then you need software that you can read and understand. No trusting some external black box in the hope that they'll never get it wrong, because everybody gets something wrong eventually. You need to have software on which this system relies that every eyeball can look at in the same way as our legal system requires every eyeball to be able to look at it. We don't talk about it enough, but the decline of legal transparency implied by the FISA courts, where Justice Roberts gets to decide who does and doesn't get access to the regular justice system, or gets shuttled off into sort of Guantanamo land, is probably the decline of the legal system meaning anything of relevance. Because once it goes through darkness, it's over. And you need the spectrum and the pipes to be done. It's not enough to be able to make a transfer between you and I in person, if doing so comes at the expense of being able to make a transfer across borders. Because then we're just back to the Iron Curtain. Then we're just back to autarky and tin pot dictators who are going to control you by controlling your body, even as your mind is finally able to be free. And I don't mean to say this with an exaggeration, but there is a serious fork in the road right now. And it is a money issue as well. It's a digital issue, but it is a money issue. So this isn't just about staying in our lanes. This lane is our lane. And the change is coming whether we want it to be or not. So we had an edge when it came to the global financial crisis. We had an edge when it came to the European Union. We had an edge when it came to quantitative easing. We had an edge when it came to understanding what inflation is about. We need to make sure we have an edge when it comes to these questions so that we don't fall behind in being the people who people should look to when it comes to monetary problems. The challenge, as I see it, is to keep modern monetary theory modern. And that means addressing the problems that come down the pipe before they're too late. And it means understanding that money and modern monetary theory is evolutionary and must evolve if it's going to survive. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And now we have time for a short Q&A. We have Kevin right here, who is going to go around with a microphone for people who have questions. Once we figure out how to turn the microphone on. So let's see. We'll take a couple of questions at a time and then come back to the panel. Okay, so we can start there and then go there in the back.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I'd like to thank you all for that presentation. I was pretty sure I was going to sleep well tonight. Raul, thank you very much for taking care of that for me. That's not going to happen. Two quick questions. I'm sorry I had to take a call during your presentation. It was kind of an important family matter, so forgive me if you actually addressed this while I had to step away. I had seen a couple of things about data collection based upon algorithms. And that a lot of the bias that was found in these algorithms was based upon the human error of those who created it. So you don't see a lot of bias in favor of women, of people of color, because it was mostly written by men. I don't know if this is true. I have my own personal bias. I believe that if a corporation is doing it, then yeah, it's true. But I want to know if you knew that there was any validity to that. For you, Mel, if you could address, because what you were saying is basically you want to be able to, all our information is being collected. It's either going to be collected by corporations, it's going to be collected by government. You can't trust corporations. And people ask me all the time when I talk about NMT, are you comfortable giving all that kind of power to central government? And I say, no, I'm not. But I am comfortable giving that power to you. If you give it to me and we give it to him, we all are the government. Having said that, does anyone know of any way to have data collected for the purposes of us being to be able to have privacy and ownership of our data? Is there a way to make sure that no one would have access to it without our express written consent? If it's going to be mined and if it's going to be stored, someone is going to be able to have access to it behind the scenes, whether they like it or not. Does anyone know of any way to make sure that's not possible? That's it.
That was already a couple of questions, so maybe you guys can answer that one. What can we do back there?
So your first question was directed to me.
I guess to everyone, but specific things that I didn't, I'm sorry I had to leave
Oh, no, it's
temporarily.
okay. I hope everything is
So
okay.
if you had actually mentioned it already, that was my apology.
Oh, yeah, no, please don't apologize. And I hope everything is okay with So, this is a question that people have been raising about what makes the bias that seems to keep kind of appearing with these algorithms. So, the person I mentioned, the Princeton University professor, Dr. Rohan Benjamin, she actually addresses this in her new book, Race After Technology. So that was an edited volume. But she has a new book out called Race After Technology, where she develops this concept called the New Jim Code, right? Based on kind of playing on Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. And she asked this question, can robots be racist? Because there's this idea of the technology is going to kind of sort this stuff out. And then the question becomes, is it the programmers, right? Like, why does this technology seem to not work well for Black people or people of color a lot of times, right? Part of the question is that you can have, on one level, it could be like, okay, does the programmer have kind of certain biases? It's also a question to me around like data itself that we think reveals something. And so that's what I was kind of getting at, is this question about does non-racist economic data exist, right? It's kind of like, we already know that most socioeconomic patterns are indicators of racial realities, of racial inequality regarding, the pricing that you get, or the racial realities of how little people get paid, and kind of the racial disparities in employment opportunities, and what jobs people get concentrated in, the salaries people tend to get, right? The racial disparities regarding things like taxes and what people's tax base are for kind of different kind of their neighborhoods and everything. So there's stuff where on one hand you can say, okay, it's the programmer, but on the other hand, some of these data sets are relying on kind of this different data. And so even if like something like network data, right? So when you're talking about like Facebook
having the data, and that was something I was looking into a little bit too, was being able to kind of decide your peer group, right? Well, some of the stuff that people are thinking about is things like, not only would, let's say, your kind of character be judged, but like the people that you're close with. So if they have low credit scores too, is that like, but most of us hang out with people in our same social group. Sociologically, data just shows, especially in class status.
But someone's even interpreting that data.
Right, so that's the thing though, but it's like, even if like, you could say, it's not just the program, someone could just say, I'm gonna take all the census data, or I'm gonna take all this data, or I'm gonna take all that data, do you know what I mean? And it could be me, it could be somebody who sees themselves as non-racist, it could be a racist. But in the end, some of that data is just gonna have patterns. They're gonna show certain inequalities, and if the lens itself is, this tells us something about these people based on this data, right? So it's both the programmer, but it's also kind of what the data is already kind of revealing about the social order of inequality that's embedded in that data. And it's also the lens in which we interpret that data, right? And that's what I was kind of getting at about character assessments, is that character assessments in and of themselves is something that we want to think about. What does that mean that we're kind of looking at data to kind of determine some of that stuff, right? So it's also kind of what is the purpose of that data doing, right? What is the interpretive lens of the viewer? So the idea that you're going to create kind of this algorithm to work out a lot of that stuff, you would have to think on multiple levels of the coder, the data itself, and then like the interpretation, right? Because this idea of evidence-based is kind of a throwback to like some of this positivism, right? Like we have the data, the numbers tell us the truth, and the data don't lie. And right now, like evidence-based is popular against Trump, but it's actually a troubling move because it's a move towards positivism, and it's a move against kind of critical interpretation of data. And really, in the end, it's not just the critique of how we collect data, it's the interpretation of data. It's always been at the heart of kind of how what we do with data as well.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to what Tamara just said. I thought that was outstanding.
Well then,
I want to kick over the data potential question to Rohan actually, but before I just wanted to make a kind of PSA. I didn't really explain this, partially because I was concerned about time, but it was also just an error on my part. So I had a picture up there of the advertisement for Macro and Cheese's episode with Brett Scott. So Steve interviews Brett, who is a kind of money heretic campaigner. He spoke at the 2017 MMT conference about the war on cash and demonetization in India. Brett and Steve walk through all the basic fintech concepts in a way that I think is especially attuned, obviously, to the MMT fan. So if you leave this and you're like, oh my god, that's just an insane cluster of things to remember, I would recommend starting back at square one with Brett Scott on Macro and Cheese and Steve.
Yeah, so to answer the question about data, I think there's three layers. One is legal. So one of the big problems is we often think that having a property interest means that you should then have the ability to sell it. Right? I own my kidney, therefore I should be able to sell it on the black market or something. But often the most important property interests are the ones you can't sell. It's pretty good that we can't sell ourselves into slavery, because that would put a huge pressure on people to try to find ways to convince you or trick you to sell yourself in slavery. So I don't think it's good when people say, well, the way to deal with this is we'll put a tax on data. Or we'll put it, we'll make them pay their fair share back into a kind of compensation fund for victims of being, data mined to death or something. I don't think that's sufficient. What we should be doing is saying, they don't get to take it, it's never theirs. To the extent that you let them use it for a while, it's under principles of duty of care. And if they violate that, then take them out. Take them out for as much as they're worth and then some. So having a private duty of care would be a pretty good start, having some sort of recognition of class action then, and having some sort of death penalty, regulatorily speaking, for multiple violations. Mark Zuckerberg is not as stupid as he sounds every time he apologizes for violating people's privacy on a level of billions of people. The second level is physical. We use the communication software internally within MMN called Riot. It's based on a protocol called Matrix. That is a peer-to-peer messaging protocol that does everything that Slack does, everything that Messenger and WhatsApp does. We have not properly activated end-to-end encryption yet because learning this stuff is a little bit difficult and it makes things can go wrong unless you get it calibrated. But both Riot and other kinds of privacy-respecting encrypted peer-to-peer alternatives, like Mastodon, if we could ever convince ourselves to get off the hellhole that is Twitter, are ways to make sure that the data isn't going into a big centralized database. Because that's the easiest thing in the world to crack into, is a place where all the marbles are just in one place. If you make it peer-to-peer, if it's all held in little boxes, then you have to crack into at least a lot of different boxes to get a sizable sample of the relevant data. And the last thing is, on that front, is that we don't need to make everything perfectly secure. Nothing is perfectly secure in cryptography or anything else. What we can do, though, is increase the risks and the costs associated with trying to break security to the point that it doesn't become viable to do the kinds of mass hoovering up of data that is being done today. Right now, we're putting all of our underwear outside the walls of our house, and we are basically letting Google cars walk past and take photos of our most intimate thoughts and dreams. All we need to do is put it on the inside and stop doing that for a while, and it'll be a lot harder to get the kinds of mass data that they are able to gather now. And you can think about it all even just like having your doors unlocked versus having your doors locked in a community. You can probably still break into a single house, but it's a lot harder to rob 15 houses in a single street in one night when all the doors are locked than when they're not. So just going from that level of sort of zero security to a little bit higher does a lot of the work.
So now we had a question there, and if you can keep your question shorter so we can take a couple of questions at a time.
Sure. My name is Adrian. I am a student from Miami. Just a really quick point of clarification regarding the Libra. Is the idea of the Libra to function basically as any other kind of currency where you can always sell Libra back to Facebook and thus cash out in another currency? That's just a quick point of clarification I have, because if so, I have a concern related to how that would undermine not just the monetary sovereignty in the United States, but also the monetary sovereignty of any other country where the Libra is getting censored.
Yeah. My understanding is you cannot cash out at any time. You need to have an exchange relationship with the reseller, who essentially acts like the reseller is the Libra Association as a primary dealer, just the central bank in a way. It is in charge of managing the interface. But beyond that, yes, you can, if you go through appropriate steps, you can get the currency back, but you don't know how much you're going to get, right? Because the exchange rate, Libra has an exchange rate, just like currencies have exchange rates with each other, right? It has a value compared to this currency and this currency and this currency.
Any more questions? And then
Hi, thank you. My name is Bill, and I'm here locally in St. James. My biggest worry is this upcoming session. How is digital currency be affected if we go into the session? Will it make it worse? Can you speak?
before you answer, let's take this other question over there.
Oh yeah, so I think one big thing here is, as Maggie said earlier, you are going to take more questions, sorry. Sorry, I wasn't sure you.
This is to Raul. Blockchain is fundamentally an open technology. It's fundamentally intended to be open to the public while remaining secure. What technical purpose or benefit is there to using blockchain as open technology in this fundamentally closed environment? And I can only imagine that the answer is that it's just a marketing tool, because there's plenty of other technologies to make secure, to do security in this kind of closed environment.
I'll just knock that out right now. You're dead accurate, Jeff.
So that's a crisis question. First of all, the other side's going to exploit that crisis moment. private script and things like that often become more prominent in periods of economic crisis already. But in that moment, you're going to have a lot of actors who put legislative amendments and things in the back pocket are going to come out and try to stick it in whatever omnibus bill gets passed, on a rainy Wednesday in the name of preserving the stability of the system. And if we don't have a vision, they will fill in the vision.
Do we have any more questions?